Yeah, let's duck up to Beijing now and catch up with Jonathan Cheng, who is a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal in Beijing. Thanks for joining us, Jonathan. Tell us first up, let's stay on the pandemic. There's been an outbreak in Beijing, was a bit of a worry. What's the current status with that?
Well, it looks like things are starting to stabilize. The first cases were discovered, I think, roughly about 2 weeks ago at a wholesale food market in the south of Beijing. We're now over 200 cases on that, but in response, the authorities here have basically shut down large parts of the city. They've done mass testing. I haven't left my home in about a week, and I think that's sort of the MO here, is to really try and get it under control in case it should become a real second wave.
Yeah, we're all sort of getting used to how to enact these measures, I suppose. Beijing wasn't terribly badly affected earlier in the year, was it? China did a pretty good job of preventing and suppressing the virus everywhere outside of Wuhan, effectively.
Yeah, that's right. Wuhan and surrounding Hubei province were definitely the epicenter of it. There were still hundreds of cases in Beijing, but again, I mean, everywhere it's gone, there have been pretty bad first waves, but I think the idea was once they had eliminated it within the country, they really wanted to ensure that it stayed gone. Beijing, of course, has extra significance because it is the capital. It's a city of more than 21 million people. It's obviously very important. So the rules were always quite stringent here in Beijing, even during that lull there between the first wave and the second wave. But now that there were signs of a potential second wave, the authorities were all over that very quickly.
Now, just switching to a totally different subject, Jonathan, tell us about the cyber attack controversy in Australia. Big focus here on the cyber attacks against the country, both government entities and private sector. A lot of people saying this is China cyber attacking Australia, but the government not being prepared to go on the record and say that. What's the reporting? What's been the line from Beijing?
Well, you know how difficult these things are to assess and to attribute blame for. I mean, you think about even the Sony hack that was attributed to North Korea. These governments are going to continue to deny it, and I don't think that there's any way to be able to prove with a smoking gun that it was them. I think if such evidence exists, it's probably quite technical, and it's probably rather classified as well. So I imagine that for those of us who aren't, computer programming experts, even if they showed us the evidence, I'm not sure we'd be able to make heads or tails of it. But obviously, I think in this case, they don't want to name China because there are enough issues between Australia and China right now, between China and many countries in the West right now. And I suppose the calculation here is that it doesn't help to further antagonize. But at the same time, it's important that the public be aware and be vigilant about these sorts of threats because they're very real. And of course, just to most directly answer your question, Beijing, of course, denies that it does any hacking at all. It says we're the victim of hacking. We're not hackers. All
right. When we see China developing its Belt and Road Initiative around the world, we can understand the strategic and economic imperatives there. When we see them building islands in the South China Seas and arming them effectively, we can see the strategic aims there. Why would a country, if it was China, why would China be involved in cyber attacks?
Well, I mean, there are things that you can get from cyber attacks that you can't get in those other ways. I mean, the South China Sea is pretty openly, it's plain about what the aims are. We don't know for cybersecurity. I mean, many times you try to cripple a website or cripple, an organization that way. But the surveillance could also be another goal of it, to nest into, someone's email account or into someone's web traffic and just collect everything, and you learn a lot. And of course, that information and that intelligence is useful. So those are potential purposes, but I obviously don't know the precise nature of the allegations here and exactly what evidence there is and what specifically is being suspected here.